I want to encourage everyone listening to do that, to tune in. When you get these invitations that land on your desk or that come into your inbox or through text message, stop, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this a full body hell yeah?
Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. My name is Steve Glaveski, and each week I'll bring you conversations with thought leaders from not only the entrepreneurial domain, but also from the world of technology, psychology, philosophy, economics, politics, biology, management and leadership, health and fitness, and more to help you think in a multidisciplinary way. Avoid relying too heavily on the first piece of information encountered, and ultimately to make better informed decisions so that you can more readily become the person that you want to become. Each and every Friday, I'll also bring you Fast Fix Friday, some short, high impact and easily digestible insights to have you finishing your week on a high. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation accelerator that works with organizations to unlock their latent potential to create more impact for humanity and lead more fulfilling lives. If your organization needs help coming up with ideas, testing and turning those ideas into reality, creating a culture of innovation, or partnering with startups, visit www.collectivecampus.io. Without further ado, let's kick into today's episode. Welcome back to Future Squared for episode number 262 with Melissa Ambrosini. Melissa is the best-selling author of Mastering Your Mean Girl and Open Wide. She's also a keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and self-love teacher. In her signature straight-talking style, Melissa teaches women how to master their inner mean girl, smash through limiting beliefs, and ditch the self-doubt so that they can start to live the life of their dreams. Named a self-help guru by Elle Magazine, her mission is to inspire women across the globe to create a heart-centered life, one that's wildly wealthy, fabulously healthy, and bursting with love. We discussed a number of topics in this conversation, including one, why being a dancer at Paris Moulin Rouge and an actress, amongst other things, ultimately left Melissa feeling unfulfilled and depressed, and how in life, reaching the proverbial goalposts doesn't always bring us joy. 2. How Melissa overcame her fight with depression and an eating disorder to become a top podcaster and best-selling author. And 3. Melissa's strategy for silencing her inner critic. We covered a whole lot more ground in this conversation, so strap yourselves in for a 1-hour deep dive with the one and only Melissa Ambrosini. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm super excited to have you on the program. And I understand by having a quick look at your Twitter feed, you just got back from a holiday to Greece. Is that right?
Yes, it was so good. Greece is like one of my favorite places on earth. And we just had 3 weeks there. It was so beautiful. The sun was shining. I'm nice and tanned, but now I am rugged up in my apartment in Sydney with a scarf and jacket and got a blanket around me now.
Oh, well, at least you got to break up the winter. I know that's a good thing about it. I mean, for someone that hasn't been to Greece before, and if they could just do one thing, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, there's too many. I mean, Santorini is so beautiful to see because it's visually just so stunning. The cliffs and the white buildings and the sunset and the blue rooftops. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But every island is so special and so different. The watercolor is like nothing I've ever seen before in my entire life. It's just the blues and the greens and the turquoise. It's just so magical.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. It's unlike anything we have in Sydney or especially in Melbourne. And I remember being in France a couple of years ago, which for the audience, I appreciate that France is not Greece. I'm aware of that. But riding a motorbike from Nice down to Monaco and just across the Mediterranean coastline there, the Côte d'Azur, as they call it in France. And it was just the most blue water I've ever seen in the world. It was, on one side you had this blue water, and on the other side of the road, you had these old churches and whatnot that date back to like 700 AD and cobblestone roads. It was just divine.
Yeah, it's pretty magical.
Yeah, love it, love it. So, Melissa, for our audience, some people will definitely be familiar with you rather, whereas others might not. What's the 2,000-foot view of who Melissa Ambrosini is?
Gosh, yeah, I mean, how long have we got? So basically, what I do today is I help mainly women unlock their full potential and live their best life.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that through my books. So I'm an author. I am a podcaster. I have a #1 podcast called The Melissa Ambrosini Show. I am a motivational speaker, so I travel around the world speaking and running my own events, but also speaking at other people's events. And I have online programs, so e-courses and meditations and all sorts of other amazing products to really support you on living your best life and unlocking your full potential. And I'm a mentor and a leader and a coach. And that is what I do. I'm also a stepmom to a 12-year-old. I am a wife. I am a friend, a daughter, a sister, and everything I do in my life is with the intention of helping and serving and supporting others to live their best life. And the way I got here was, no, I wasn't born out of the womb like this. I didn't have this desire when I was first born. I hit rock bottom in 2010 and ended up in hospital very, very unwell, both physically and mentally. So I had a whole host of health issues, but then also was dealing with mental issues as well. So depression and anxiety and panic attacks and an eating disorder and things like that. So it took me hitting rock bottom in 2010 to get on this path, my true path, which I'm on now. And before that, I was actually a professional dancer. I danced at the Moulin Rouge in Paris, and I did acting and TV presenting. So I was very much in the limelight in that way. And I loved performing. I loved dancing. I loved acting. But I knew deep down that it was never my true path. And in order for me to get on my true path, which is the path I'm on now, you know, the universe had to give me a pretty hefty wake-up call. And that was, you know, taking my health away from me physically and mentally and ending up in hospital. And even though that was the hardest time and period of my life, I am so grateful for it because it has led me to where I am now. It's led me to the work that I get to do now, and I'm so grateful to have had that experience earlier in life. Yeah. Because a lot of people don't get that wake up call till they're in their 50s or their 60s, and then they're like, damn, you know, think about all those things I could have done. So I'm super grateful I got mine in my very early 20s, and it's put me on this path that I'm on now, serving and helping people.
Absolutely love that. And, you know, for a lot of people listening to this show, particularly young women who may be listening and have aspirations to become, say, an entrepreneur or, say, a dancer or an actress, oftentimes we have these big, lofty goals, and we think that once I get to this point, then I'll be happy, right? The whole notion of this arrival fallacy, and we see this play out across all forms of creative pursuits, and even in the athletic domain, when people go pro, they think they'll be happy. But oftentimes what happens is you get to that point and for whatever reason, you're still not happy. And in your case, like you said, you were dancing at the Moulin Rouge in Paris, you were acting, you're doing all this cool stuff which people normally associate with success and prosperity. But for whatever reason, deep down, you weren't happy and you were actually depressed, and you went through a whole ordeal that ultimately you emerged from stronger. But, I mean, how do you reconcile the fact that you were doing all this cool stuff, but you ultimately weren't happy deep down?
I think at the time, I didn't have the level of awareness that I have now. So I didn't know that it wasn't my truth. I just had, I was achieving all of these things, like being on top TV shows, dancing at the Moulin Rouge. Like, I was achieving all these great things, but something within me was not right. Like, there was this niggling, unfulfilled feeling within me, and I couldn't quite articulate it because I didn't have the level of awareness that I have now, which is, my intuition is so heightened now that if something doesn't feel true for me, I know straight away, and I'm like, nope, not doing it. Where back then I didn't know, so it was kind of like, well, why do I feel like this? Like, why am I achieving these goals and still feeling deeply unfulfilled?
Yeah.
And it's because I believe that it wasn't my deep truth, it's an idea that I thought, maybe someone told me that, the pinnacle of your career is dancing at the Moulin Rouge or getting on these top TV shows. And it was an idea that I had heard from somewhere else that actually wasn't my truth. Maybe it was my acting teacher's or my dancing teacher's truth. And so when I got there, I was like, hang on, this doesn't even feel good.
Yeah.
And my whole life and my whole business now is built on intuition. Every decision I make is built from my intuition. And I have this saying that I live by, and my husband lives by as well, is if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. And that literally comes down to every decision we make in our life, from business to personal. So if it's a business decision to, I've been asked to speak somewhere, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no thank you. And then it comes down to, dinner invites. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a no thank you. And that is literally how I run and live my life now. And I want to encourage everyone listening to do that, to tune in. When you get these invitations that land on your desk or that come into your inbox or through text message, stop, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this a full body hell yeah? And if it is, go for it. Dive in. Go head first. But if there's a hesitation, then you need to honor that, because when we ignore that, we ignore our intuition, there's always a price to pay.
Yeah, couldn't agree more on that. And I think it's Derek Sievers who was quoted as saying, I'm either saying hell yeah or no in I think it was Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans. And I absolutely love that quote. And it's something that I personally have been getting better at saying no, because productivity and effectiveness is ultimately what you don't do. But not only is it about productivity, it's about doing stuff that actually feeds your soul. Because if you just start saying yes to all sorts of stuff, but only one out of every, say, 5 things you say yes to is enjoyable, then that's going to weigh you down after a while. It's like I used to get a lot of people approaching me to appear on the podcast, and initially, because the podcast was small, I'd be saying yes to a lot of people, but a lot of the time the conversations I was having with people kind of ultimately were pushing me towards not even wanting to do the podcast anymore. And now I'm at a point where it's like, well, I'm only going to interview people who I actually want to speak with, and therefore it's going to make me excited to keep going. And that sort of analogy can be applied to anything. But just having said that, I'm really glad that you said hell yeah to appearing on my podcast, Mel.
You're so welcome.
So in today's sort of world of social media, where it's very easy for young people out there to see social media as a surrogate for their self-worth and be all about how many likes and followers can I get, and looking at what other people are doing online and saying, well, maybe if I just do what they're doing, then I'll be happy. Because obviously people are only putting their best foot forward online. At least most people are just putting their best foot forward online. And there's a whole push now around entrepreneurship and go out and do your own thing, which I think is great. But at the same time, is that really the answer for people? Maybe it's just that they're feeling unfulfilled in their lives because they need to take up a hobby, or maybe they could just do some freelancing on the side, or they need to do some travel. I mean, in terms of unpacking what people should actually do to help find that underlying why and listen to their intuition, I mean, what do you tell people that you work with when it comes to trying to figure out what they're actually going to do with their lives?
Yeah, well, one of the best tools to strengthen your intuition is meditation. And I am such a huge advocate for it. I meditate twice a day for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. I absolutely love it. I have some guided meditations on my website. I love it. I'm actually studying right now to become a qualified meditation teacher. I love it so much. And it strengthens your intuition. So for someone who's like, I don't know, I can't hear my intuition, I'm not sure, like, what's it saying? It's like a muscle. You know, if you want to get a tight booty, you got to go to the gym and do your squats. If you want to strengthen your intuition, you've got to meditate. It's like your spiritual sit-ups, right? So that is how we strengthen our intuition. And that is, we've got to do it. We've got to start going inward and really listening to that voice, because that voice is your truth. And that's the place that we want to live from.
Yeah, and I mean, I meditate daily, and one thing that I find is also helpful in that space is sensory deprivation tanks. I'm not sure if you ever float, Mel, but just getting in that space where you're completely devoid of sense, like no sight, no sound. You're basically floating for an hour, and it's just darkness. And when you get into that space, you tend to have a lot of these thoughts come or emerge from your subconscious that are normally buried deep down, because you've got so many distractions in day-to-day life that you never even think about these things. But then it kind of hits you while you're laying there after 30, 40 minutes. Oh, that's why I am this way, or just you have these sort of little revelations. And I find that unless you give yourself or give your mind that space for these revelations to appear, then you're always just operating at this sort of distracted state.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling that you get when you are in a float tank or in a meditation, that oneness, expansiveness, where time, space, physical realm don't even exist, whatever gives you that feeling, do that regularly. You know, tap into that regularly. It's so powerful and important. And that's that same feeling that you describe, I get in my meditations. Yeah,
love it, love it. So on feeding your intuition, obviously things like meditation and float tanks and all that sort of spiritual stuff can help, but also collecting dots, as I like to say, which is basically feeding your brain with information so that you can make better decisions. And it sounds like over the past, 8 years since you had your ordeal in 2010 and had to bounce back from that, I imagine you fed your mind, your brain with a lot of information that helped you find your path and the path you're on today. So were there any sort of really influential, be they authors or whatnot, that helped you find your way?
Oh, so many. Honestly, after I ended up in hospital, one of the first spiritual books that I picked up was Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. And that was kind of like the catalyst that opened the door to this personal development and spiritual world for me. And from there, I read every single spiritual text that I could get my hands on, and still do. I'm still 8 years later, I'm obsessed with reading these sorts of books. I don't read fiction. I only read business, entrepreneurial, spiritual, self-help books. It's just my jam. I love it so much. It fuels my soul. There are so many great teachers out there, and I want to encourage everyone to just be mindful of the input that you have. Turn off the TV, turn off the radio, stop watching the news every single day and reading the papers and things, and make sure that the input that is coming into your world is positive and inspiring. Make sure, you're reading really inspiring books that are going to support you. Turn off the radio and put on my podcast or Steve's podcast, and just make sure that anything that's coming in is of the highest vibration, because as soon as you walk out your door, you are bombarded with marketing and mixed messages. And if you're not careful, or if you don't have that level of awareness, you can get really sucked in. So, you know, for me, it's like when I'm in my home and when I have control of my environment, it's always inspiring and uplifting. And the music that I listen to, if I watch movies, the movies that I watch, and, you know, for me, intuitively, I have never loved violent or aggressive or action movies. I've never, ever liked them. You know, even action movies, it's just not my jam. It's too violent. Like, I remember going to the cinema with one of my boyfriends many, many years ago, and I think we went to see something like Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I had my fingers in my ears, and like the sensory like overload for me was, and I'm such an empath, I'm so sensitive, like it was too much. Like I'm like, it's not that it was violent. I can't even remember. I'm sure there was some violent scenes.
I'm sure there was.
It was just too much for my nervous system. And that's the thing, like the cortisol in my body went through the roof because it was just way too much for my nervous system. And this is the thing, like we want to calm our nervous system. We want to de-excite our nervous system. Most of us are running around with cortisol swimming through our veins. And this is not good for your immune system, for your physical body, your mental health, anything. And so for me, do whatever you can do to de-excite your nervous system, to come out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. And so for me, you know, the input that I surround myself with is really important. The music, the movies, the podcasts, the TV, all of those things. And I was actually reading a little while ago, because sometimes my husband and my son, they like watching these action movies, and they have the, you know, or sci-fi action things, and they're like, watch it with us. And I'm like, I can't. No, I can't sit there. And they're like, we love having you watch movies with us. I'm like, no, I'll watch a feel-good rom-com, something that makes me feel really good, makes me smile, makes me laugh, maybe a little tear of joy. I want to watch that stuff. And for a while I would judge myself over it. I would say, oh, you know, come on, Melissa, get a little bit deeper than that. But I realized that intuitively my nervous system is just repelled by that overload, that stimulation, and it's okay. And then I found this paper, and I can't remember where I read it, but this paper about these action movies, these highly violent movies, and what it does for your nervous system and the cortisol in your body. And I showed my husband, and he was like, wow. And since then he's stopped watching those movies as well. And we don't really want to encourage our son to watch them either. So that was a very long-winded answer, but just be really mindful of the input that is coming into your world through all of your platforms, even your Instagram feeds and your Facebook feeds. Like, are you following really negative people, or are you following all inspiring people? And when you look at your feed, do you get excited and inspired? I sure do. I don't follow anyone who's negative or, putting out nasty things or anything like that. So It's really important, we're so tapped in, we're so online all the time, tapped in. So just be mindful of the input that is coming into your world.
Yeah. Ultimately, it comes down to being really intentional about what you're consuming. It's like Zig Ziglar once said, you are who you are based on what goes into your mind, and you can change who you are and where you are based on changing what goes into your mind. And you mentioned the news, and people just go home, and I think it's just a simple gut reaction for a lot of people to just turn the television on and put the news on. And ultimately, the news is 90% plus negative, because nobody wants to hear that a plane landed successfully at Sydney Airport today, because that's not news, right? And if all you do is consume the news and negative information like that, you're going to have a very negative view of where the world is at today. And so many people are like, oh, the world is worse than it's ever been. And it's like, actually, it's better than it's ever been because more people are educated in the world than ever. Lifespans are longer than ever. Child mortality is way down. Literacy is way up. You know, we've got clean food, healthcare. It's 150 years ago, the world was a much worse place to live. Like homicide is way down. But if you watch the news, then you're going to be convinced that it's negative and you're going to walk around with a negative sort of disposition. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, choosing what goes into your mind is critical. But I guess question I have, and this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, because a lot of guys I know, a lot of girls I know in the space, they're into their meditation, they're into the spirituality, but at the same time, they're trying to build businesses and they're ambitious. I mean, how do you reconcile that ambition, which you clearly do have, with that calm that you're seeking?
It's a very fine line, and it comes down to another saying that I have, and that is that I move through my day with ease and grace.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything I do in my life, I want to be done with ease and grace. That is my business and in my personal life. So if it can't be done, this is what my husband and I say to each other all the time, if it can't be done with ease and grace, don't do it. So he'll say to me, oh, baby, I need you to do this for me for this. And I might roll my eyes and he'll be like, right, okay, if you can't do it with ease and grace, don't worry about it. I'll get someone else to do it. Because there's no point in me doing it, resenting it and hating the process.
Yeah.
If I can't do it from that place of ease and grace. And so by having, you know, I'm very ambitious. I'm very driven. I'm a type A, overachieving, Aries hitter type of person. So, you know, I want to achieve all of these great things and I want to do all of these things in my life, but I have such a deep knowing, and this has really been flexed through meditation, that everything is always unfolding exactly the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And yes, I want to be sitting on the couch with Oprah one day, having her interview me. Absolutely. And I know that will happen, but it will happen when it's meant to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no point in me getting stressed about it or trying to force it. You know, there's no point. It's everything is always unfolding exactly the way it's supposed to. And my role is to, you know, have my goals and keep showing up every single day, keep putting one foot in front of the other toward my dreams every single day, and do it with as much ease and grace as I possibly can. Otherwise, life becomes about push and stress, and those two words are not in my vocabulary anymore. I have pushed and I have stressed, and it's put me in hospital.
Yeah.
So for me, those two words are not something that I want in my vocab. So I make sure that, you know, it's done with ease and grace. And on a personal note, like, we're renovating a house at the moment, and in January, we bought our dream home in the Sunshine Coast.
Awesome. In
Queensland.
Congratulations.
And thank you. It's just magic. And I never thought it was by accident in terms of we weren't looking, and this house found us. And I never thought I would be someone who would renovate a home. Like, I'd always kind of told myself the story that I'm not patient enough.
Yeah.
And so I always just thought that I would be the person that would just buy a home and live in it, you know, and not renovate. Where my husband has renovated 2 homes before this one, and he was kind of like, no, let's, you know, our dream home, we'll just move into it and it'll be all good. You know, if we have to do a few things, then great. And then this house found us, and it's in our dream location, in our dream area. And when we saw it, you know, very clearly it needed work. And I said to him, I will only do this with you if we can do this renovation with ease and grace.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to buy into the collective consciousness that is renovating is stressful and hard work and things go wrong and this happens and it costs more and always takes longer time. And so I said to him, I will only do this renovation with you if we can do it with ease and grace. And he said, 1,000%. I'm so on board. And that's how I want to do this renovation, because for him, the last 2 renovations he did were very stressful and caused a lot of stress in his life and took double the amount of time and spent double the amount of money that they wanted to spend. And so we embarked on this renovation. And on the first day that our builder rocks up, this was a Monday, the first day that our builder rocks up, there was drama. The guy underneath us was screaming and had defamation letters and all this stuff that Greg, our builder, at 2 hours in to the first day of working on our house, left. And I get this distressed call from my husband saying, you're never going to believe what's happened. And, Peter has threatened Paul. We've got defamation letters. And he was so overwhelmed. And Greg's walked off the job and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hang on a minute. I said, remember, we made a pact that we were only going to do this with ease and grace. And I said to him, do you have limiting beliefs around this? Do you still believe that this is going to be done with ease and grace, or do you believe that this is going to be stressful? And he sat with it and he went quiet and he said, I have a belief that all renovations are stressful and overwhelming and there's drama and there's always drama. And I said, okay, you need to go away. You need to sit with this. You need to meditate on this, and you need to resolve that limiting belief within yourself. Otherwise, we are going to have a very, very, very long, stressful renovation. And so he went away, and then that night he came back to me and he said, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. I realized that I had gone into this renovation the 3rd time with all of these limiting beliefs, and I've now resolved them within myself. And thank you for reminding me. And since that moment, our renovation has been nothing but ease and grace. And we're like 5 months in, and it's been so interesting to watch it unfold with just grace. And it doesn't have to be stressful. And, this is just one example of where we can apply that ease and grace without that push and stress into our life, because it comes in everywhere, in your business and in your personal life. And I don't want to live my life pushing and stressing. I don't. Life is short and really precious, and too short to be carrying around these old limiting beliefs, these old stories, or maybe they're not even your stories. They're someone else's stories. Life is too precious for that. So just be mindful of, if you're pushing and stressing, be mindful of the limiting stories that you may be telling yourself, and, rewrite them, reprogram them.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And before we go on, we're not going to see you on the block anytime soon, are we, Mel?
Definitely not.
Fantastic. But something that jumps out there is the whole the expectations that you set, or the way you choose to attach meaning to things. Like in this case, it was, you've got a belief that renovating is stressful and it's going to create drama and all this sort of stuff. And if that's your definition of it, then that's effectively what you're going to manifest by way of your actions and the way you choose to respond to things. Whereas you may just set the expectation that, look, things may not go to plan, and we should expect that, so that when it does happen, you're already expecting that's going to happen. So you're going to respond in a way that's a lot more measured. You're like, that's cool. This is, we knew this was going to happen. Let's just deal with it as best we can on a day-to-day basis, rather than stressing out because something hasn't gone to plan. Because I think if you've got these expectations that things are just going to be perfect, and then, inadvertently, well, as is always the case when it comes to renovating, they're not perfect, you're just not going to be able to reconcile that, and that's where stress comes from. But if you set the expectation up front and, like you said, go through it with ease and grace, then you'll have a very different experience. But on this whole notion of self-limiting beliefs, taking that outside of the world of renovating, but applying it to our own personal lives. Now, since you've gone on this sort of whole new sort of life trajectory since 2010, I imagine when you first started taking those first few steps on this road, that you may have still had some self-limiting beliefs. A lot of people, when they first get into entrepreneurship or first get into something new, they're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is for me. Like, I like learning new things. I'm actually learning the art of stand-up at the moment. I'm going to get up and start doing all these stand-up sets. And do I think I'm naturally funny? Probably not. But if you go in there thinking, no, you need to be naturally funny to do this, and you're never going to give that a shot. But ultimately, everything has a formula underneath it. There's things you can learn. You can learn from people that have done it before. So I guess where I'm going with this is, what self-limiting beliefs held you back initially, and how did you overcome them?
I wrote a whole book about this called Mastering Your Mean Girl. So that's my first book, which is your mean girl, your inner mean girl is that voice, that limiting fear-based voice that we all have in our head, and you've got an inner bad boy, and everyone's got that voice. That, you can call it your ego or whatever you want to call it, inner critic. And yes, of course, I had a ton of limiting fear-based inner mean girl beliefs, a ton.
Yep.
But I learned very quickly how to master her in a 3-step process, which I can talk you through. And I wrote a whole book on it, which you can read. It's called Mastering Your Mean Girl. And that is how I live my life now. I apply and I take myself through my 3-step Mastering Your Mean Girl process whenever she pops up. Absolutely, I still take my own medicine because I'm not enlightened. If I was, I would have levitated out of this body by now because I wouldn't need to be here on earth anymore. But I'm still here. I've still got more to learn. And when I first started on this journey, my inner mean girl was very loud. You're not good enough. Who do you think you are? You can't write a book. You can't start your own dream business. No one's going to buy your products. No one's going to read the book. You may as well not begin. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. Give up. You're never going to get out of debt. You're never going to meet the guy. You know the voice. We've all got it.
Of course.
And I'm so glad that I learned how to master her, because I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't. And the thing is a lot of people let that voice run and ruin their life. So that voice is essentially in the driver's seat of their life, running it, and you're in the passenger seat. But what I realized was, hang on a minute, no. You, mean girl, get in the passenger seat and I'm driving. I'm the creator of my life. I am the master of my destiny and I am in control. So you can just chill out over there, get in the back seat actually.
Get in the boot.
Yeah, get in the boot and allow me to run my own life.
Yeah.
And now when she pops up, and she does, nowhere near as much as what she used to, I just take myself through my 3-step Mastering Your Mean Girl process. The thing is like women have between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day, and men have around 40,000.
Yep.
So that's potentially 60 to 80,000 inner mean girl thoughts that we have a day. That's a lot, right? So you may be mastering your mean girl 60 to 80,000 times a day. And cool, you start doing it now. Tomorrow, it might be 40,000.
Yeah.
The next day, it might be 30,000. The next day, it might be 20,000. And then you get to a point where you might have one a day. You might have one every 2 days. You might have one a week. You know, if something comes up that triggers you, it might trigger an old mean girl default response.
Yeah.
And that's the place where I'm at in my life now. Very rarely does she pop up. She might pop up if there is something that's triggered me and an old default inner mean girl thought plays out. But I'm pretty good at mastering her and then returning back to my truth. So don't think that you are alone in having these thoughts, that you're not good enough or smart enough or pretty enough or successful enough, or you'll never get out of debt, or you'll never meet the guy, whatever it is. Don't think you're alone. We all have these, but what we do with them is what matters. And so how to master those thoughts is I have a very simple 3-step process. Mm-hmm. The first step is awareness. You have to become aware of it. And you don't know what you don't know. So awareness is key. And once you know what you know, you can't unknow it. Unless you have a Men in Black zapper gun that erases your memory, or you fall over and hit your head and, have a really bad head injury. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. And so once you know that it's your mean girl telling you that you're never going to get out of debt, or that, you're not smart enough to start your own business, that's the first step. You shone light on that darkness.
Yep.
The second step is we gently close the door on it. So when that inner mean girl comes knocking on your mental door to tell you those things, you're not good enough or whatever it is, you say, thank you, but no thank you, I'm not interested today. Think of it like an annoying salesperson who comes knocking on your door to sell you something that you're not interested in one bit. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't invite them in and say, okay, give me your 45-minute spiel on Tupperware.
Yeah.
You'd be like, thank you, but no thank you. I don't have time today. I'm not interested. Thank you so much, though. Enjoy your day. Have a beautiful day. Close the door. You wouldn't go and slam the door in their face. This isn't about anger or frustration. This is about just saying thank you, but no thank you, not interested. And then the third step is you return back to love. You return back to your truth. What is your truth? Do you really believe? Do you really, really deep down in your heart of all hearts believe that you won't ever get out of debt? Like really, really?
Yeah.
Like, do you have hardcore evidence and proof that that'll never happen? Do you have hardcore evidence and proof that you'll never meet the guy? Do you have hardcore evidence and proof that you will never get out of debt, or no one will buy your book, or that your business will flop? No, you don't have hardcore evidence and proof of that. It's just your fear speaking. And it's very convincing. I get it. She is very convincing. But you don't actually have proof on that. So get over that. And take yourself through that 3-step process: awareness, close the door, choose love instead. And if you have to do that 60 to 80,000 times a day until it becomes deeply embedded in your cells, then that's what you've got to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that step one, especially being aware of those thoughts because ultimately we are hijacked by these thoughts, these 60 to 80,000 thoughts if you're a female, and 40,000 thoughts a day if you're a male. And ultimately, a lot of people, I don't think, are cognizant of the fact that we're being hijacked. And those thoughts aren't really a representation of who we are. They're just these involuntary things that just come in and out without our even inviting them, right? So becoming more aware of that. And then it's like going to the gym. If you're a guy and you want to build muscle, you got to keep going day after day after day after day. And in order to get more control over these thoughts, like you said, you've got to be conscious of this day after day. It's like I did this thing, it was probably like 2 years ago, where I wanted to not default to judging people on the street for whatever reason, like just be a better person. And in order to do that, it was like, okay, every time I see someone who I'm normally going to default to judging because, they're smoking or something like that. No, I'm going to stop myself in that moment and I'm going to reframe that thought with something else. And by doing that intentionally for 21 days, at the end of that, I was like, that became my default setting. Like I became way less judgmental than what I was. But if I was to just do that for one day and be like, this isn't working, then and gave up on day 2, then you really need that intentional effort for a number of days, if not weeks, if not months, for this sort of awareness to just become your sort of default setting.
Exactly. Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. So that was, you mentioned briefly mastering your mean girl, and this March, just 4 short months ago, you released your second book, called Open Wide, a radically real guide to deep love, rocking relationships, and soulful sex, which Lorna Jane, the founder of Lorna Jane, the activewear brand, basically said anybody can benefit from. So what does Open Wide give us that Mastering Your Mean Girl didn't?
Yeah, good question. So Mastering Your Mean Girl was very much an inward journey. They both are. They're both spiritual self-help books, so they're very much inward. But Mastering Your Mean Girl is really about you and your inner journey and really getting yourself to a place where you are overflowing with self-love within yourself. Open Wide is a relationship manual. So we spend the first section of the book obviously talking about your most important relationship of all, which is your relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go outward to our relationships and how to cultivate beautiful relationships with your family and friends, and then finally, your beloved, and how to call in your soulmate, how to be in a conscious partnership, how to experience soulful connections and soulful sex. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
No, that makes sense. And I guess relationships is something that you've spent a lot of time thinking about. Obviously you've got it in the title of your book there, Rocking Relationships and Soulful Sex. So I guess one thing I wanted to unpack is, and it's not just about relationships, it applies to any sort of endeavor. Like if you get into entrepreneurship, the first few months, it's all new and novel and exciting, and you've got these dopamine receptors lighting up in your brain. But then after a while, it's like, okay, well, this is the same thing I've been doing for 6 months. The dopamine receptors get a little bit blunted. That initial energy and enthusiasm that comes with starting a new venture or a new relationship, the quote unquote honeymoon period, may fade a little bit. What do you say to people, or what do you do in your own, say, relationships to keep that fire burning?
Relationships are why we're here, we're not taught how to be in relationships. This is why I wrote this manual. When we're born into this world and no one gives us a guide on how to be in a relationship and how to be a good partner or a good friend or a good daughter or a good sister, mm-hmm. No one teaches us these things. And relationships are the biggest game that we play. Yet we have no guide. And I fumbled. I have fumbled for most of my life until firstly I fell in love with myself. And that was the first step. And then I realized the importance and potency of relationship. Humans are hardwired for connection. It's in our DNA. We're not meant to live on our own on a mountaintop by ourselves. We would go insane. Mm. And so they are such a huge part of our life, yet so many people are just doing it all wrong. And so that's why I wrote this book. I really wanted to give women a guide on how to be in these relationships and how to really fill yourself up and fill other people up as well. It's such an important thing because we are in relationship to everyone at all times. Every interaction is an opportunity to grow within yourself and to be of service to someone else. So it's so important. And for me, I realized how important it was many years ago, and I wanted to share it because I saw the effect that it was having in my life, and I wanted to share it with others. So, what was your question again? I'm sorry.
How do you keep the fire burning, whether it be for a relationship or a business venture? How do you stay excited and enthused?
How do I keep the fire burning and how do I stay enthused? Okay, so It's like a plant. If you want a plant to grow, you've got to water it. You've got to give it sunlight. You've got to give it the right amount of love and attention and, tend to the soil. Same with your relationships. If you want them to grow and flourish, you've got to invest in them. You've got to water them. You've got to give them the right amount of love and attention. So for me, I am constantly investing in my relationships, whether that's with my friends, with my husband. I'm constantly giving them love and attention. And that looks really different for each relationship. Some people it's like, catch-ups or sending beautiful text messages or a handwritten note, or whenever I catch up with a girlfriend, I, just make them feel like they are the most important person on the planet. And that is my intention. In 2015, my best friend passed away from cancer. And one thing that she did that I loved so much, one of many things, is she made you feel like you were the most important person on earth. And she did that for everyone, not just me because I was her best friend, but I saw and I witnessed her do that for everyone. She had this innate ability to make you feel like you were the queen. And I got so inspired by that, but that became my intent. I want to make sure every person I connect with feels like the most important person on earth. I want them to feel totally loved up. I want them to feel like they are the best person on this planet. And so that's what I do. Whenever I'm catching up with a friend or with my husband or in a business meeting, I'm really present. I listen. I really listen with both ears. I ask really good questions. I love learning about other people. I prefer to ask questions about other people than to talk about myself. To be honest, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I want to know what you do, Steve. Like, I want to know about you. I want to know, tell me your story. Yeah. Tell me about your family. Like, where did you grow up? What did you do? What were your dreams as a kid? Like, I love asking. That's why my podcast is so successful, because I'm really good at asking questions. And this is something that I've really owned over the years. I was a TV presenter as well. I'm good at asking questions. But a lot of us don't ask questions and we don't listen with both ears. And everyone just wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be heard. And so if you're listening with just one ear and waiting impatiently to interject and give your 2 cents, that other person's going to feel it. So to really build your relationships, listen with both ears. Do not interrupt. My husband and I have a rule: don't talk until the full stop has been put in place. Because it's constantly like talking over each other, it's so frustrating when you're trying to talk about something, especially if it's emotional, like you're feeling heated or emotional, and someone's kind of like not really listening and trying to interject and give their 2 cents, and you're like, hang on, whoa, just let me get to my full stop before you interject. So that's something that my husband and I are really conscious and mindful of. And, he'll wait till he hears my full stop and then he'll talk. And another thing that we do as well is we always start the next person will always say, once they've heard the full stop, they'll say, I hear you, honey. I fully hear you. And so that the other person knows that they're heard. Because like I said, human beings just want to be heard.
One thing I really loved about what you said there was that whether it's a relationship with your significant other, whether it's your friends, family, whether it's your business, it's like growing a plant. You've got to keep watering it. And I think there is, particularly amongst younger, less self-aware people, this misconception that love is a noun. It's just a feeling, but it really is a verb. It's about what you do, showing up day after day after day. And that doing actually manifests itself in the way you then feel about that particular person, versus expecting there to be just some magical feeling that you wake up with every day that you associate with this person without actually putting in any time, without actually watering that plant. So we are almost out of time, Melissa, but real quick, just wanted to touch on your podcast. You've had some amazing guests on the show. Some of my favorite authors have been on the show, such as Ryan Holiday. You mentioned spirituality earlier in the show. You've had Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. His dad wrote the 4 Agreements and the 5th Agreement, I believe. You had Lewis Howes on there recently. Who's been your favorite guest, if you can pick one? I know it's probably like picking favorite children. And what has hosting the podcast taught you?
Oh, it's so hard to choose one. But I mean, I have got so much out of every single interview.
Yeah.
And I love it so much. Like, it brings me so much joy. And I get to interview people that I'm obsessed with, that have changed, something within me. I literally read a book and then I reach out to that person. I'm like, I want you on my show because you have inspired me. So everyone that has been on the show has been transformational for me.
Yep.
That's why I interview them. Mm-hmm. But Neil Donald Walsh was definitely, he wrote Conversations with God.
Yeah. That
interview was amazing. I think as well because that book was so pivotal for me in my life that interviewing him was a pretty surreal experience. But everyone has been so amazing. I've got nuggets of wisdom from every single person. I've not walked away from any interview without some sort of nugget of wisdom. So, and we've got so many more great ones coming on board, which will be awesome. And what has the podcast taught me? I mean, in terms of my own personal journey, it's reminded me of a lot of things I already know to be true. And I'm constantly getting those reminders, which is really beautiful. It's really, doing the podcast has helped me with my listening skills and my question skills. Like I said before, there's 2 things that I want to work on.
Yep.
It's helped me slow down. I used to maybe speak a little bit faster and not have so much breath in between sentences. And it really does, having a podcast, and I'm not sure if you've noticed this as well, but you have to become a really good listener.
Yeah.
Because you're not sitting opposite someone. I almost envy Lewis Howes a little bit because he gets to sit opposite his podcast guests and you can read facial signs and body language and signals. But when I'm doing my podcast, I'm staring at a computer screen. Yeah. So you really have to listen.
Yeah, I'm staring at a Google Doc at the moment, and Skype is up, and that's about it. So there is absolutely no body language at the moment, but that's part of the beauty of it. Like you say, it helps you and it forces you to become a much better listener. And I think one of the best things about it is in today's sort of run and gun, busy environment, we rarely get the opportunity to have deep dive conversations like this one, and on a day-to-day basis. So hosting a podcast does give you that opportunity. Television, it's all built around 5-minute bits, 10-minute bits here and there, very surface level. Thing I love about podcasts is getting really deep with someone about all sorts of underlying issues and how they manage to overcome them. So thank you so much for bringing 100% to this conversation, Melissa, and telling the world your story. We really appreciate that. I'm sure our listeners will take a lot out of this one. If they want to find out more about you, they can obviously check out melissaambrosini.com. They can find you on Twitter at Mel_Ambrosini. They can get your books on Amazon and at all good bookstores. I saw both books side by side at Dimmicks in Melbourne the other day. And obviously your podcast, The Mel Ambrosini Show. Is there anything else they should be checking out?
I am super active on Instagram, so that's just Melissa Ambrosini, and the podcast is actually called The Melissa Ambrosini Show. So come and introduce yourself to me on Instagram. I love hanging out there. It's super fun. Come listen to the podcast, grab my books. If I'm speaking in your city, come and join one of my events. But yeah, just come and introduce yourself. I love connecting with like-minded people. Like you said, one of my favorite things to do is to have these deep conversations with people. I am not the person who loves big dinner parties with 10 people. I am more of a one-on-one. So when I get invited to parties, I'm like, it's not my jam. I would much rather take that friend out for lunch, just one-on-one, so we can dive really deep and have a really juicy conversation. So come and connect with me. I love meeting like-minded people, and I just want to thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really grateful, and if you're ever in Sydney, please do let me know.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much, Mel. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Hi guys, it's Steve again. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to receive a weekly email from me, complete with reflections, books I've been reading, words of wisdom, and access to blogs, ebooks, and more that I'm publishing on a regular basis, just leave your details at futuresquared.xyz/subscribe and you'll receive the very next one. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, please take a minute to like, share, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify. It goes a long way to giving the podcast the exposure it needs so I can continue bringing you guests and conversations of the highest caliber. Until next time, Future Squared is out.